I might as well just say it. Welcome, huge movie fanatics coming your way. State of Flux Matt.
Hi there.
And huge movie fanatic Nate. I'm delighted.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm delighted. Year two, we got last year in 23. We got together twice, which was
Yes.
2 times more than we had for the last whatever
10 years almost.
8,
yeah.
10 years, whatever.
Yeah.
24. It's May 1st actually when we're recording. We're
Yep,
getting
yep.
together. I'm delighted. The first
I
thing
am
I
as
want,
well.
I'm delighted, and hopefully maybe minimum one more time this year, 2 more times. It'll be interesting to see.
I'm hoping, especially now with my youngest daughter being a little older, that I'll have more
Now
available
she's in
time.
college.
Pretty much.
Now you have more time. So no pressure, but I'm curious to see how many times we can get together.
Yes.
Fingers crossed for 2 or even 3 or more.
I'm
So
hoping for at minimum 3.
3 would be very nice. So
Yes.
so we started this channel way back when. Reconnected last year, continuing the reconnection this year. Very cool. So the first video we're doing today is actually requests from Will Powell in the UK. People who watch my channels, you know Will Powell. And incidentally, he would like to, and this is something in the future we could possibly talk about, he'd really be interested in like a phone conversation with you and I.
Oh, interesting.
Because he's always wanted to, he's several times he said he'd like to talk to like both of you and I on camera.
Fascinating. I
And
would love
that's something I just want you to know that he wanted it to happen today. I told him, well, the logistics and time and this and that, it can't happen today. But just so you know, he would like that to happen.
that. I'm sure we can make that
So
happen.
that would probably be in a perfect world, maybe at my place when
Yeah.
surroundings are not so distracting and things, and maybe you got a little more time. But
Yeah.
we're gonna try, just so you know, Will, he knows now, we're gonna try to hopefully make that happen. But in the meantime, Will did give us some really good questions, and so we're coming at you to do these. I don't know what the hell I'm going to title this video, but that's my problem for later. He gave us some really
Fan question.
fan questions, maybe something like that. He gave us some really good questions, and honestly, some of them were so good in my opinion that I don't know if I can answer. I was talking to Matt when I was setting up. I don't know if I can really answer them all right now. It's kind of more like as life goes on, some answers will show themselves to some of these
For sure.
questions.
He hit me with some of these questions before the recording, and I sat there like stumped. So I'm curious to see if we're stumped on the same ones, because that could prove for another
That
video
might be
later.
interesting. I wrote a little bit of mine down because I'm pushing 50 and my memory and stuff. So I wrote some down on here. But anyway, he's got how many questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. First one, which I think is kind of funny, and honestly, there's probably a lot more. I mean, I'm a slasher horror film fan, so I think almost every movie I like almost would go in this category. But he asks, guilty pleasure movies for Nate and Matt. What are our guilty pleasure movies? And if you'd like to start with some of your guilty pleasure movies, and what is a guilty pleasure?
So,
I guess kind of like it. Go ahead.
So this one is the one where I'm like, I have definitive answers for this. However, I'm also of the mindset that if I like something, I like it. I don't have guilt over my pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's kind of like if you like something, unless you're Catholic or something. Like, yeah, I see. I was thinking the exact same thing. Like some of the stuff on my list, it's not like I feel guilty. But
so my answers that I'm going to hit you with right now are ones that people give me grief over liking.
So they might fit into the guilty.
It would fit into this category, but I will firmly defend these movies with my life. One of the ones that pops off first is Wild Things.
Oh, with tits.
I guess
the first thing I think of is
Denise Richards,
augmented breasts.
Nev Campbell. I genuinely think that is one of the most twisty, turny movies, and not all of the twists and turns make sense, but it keeps you invested so wholeheartedly that you forget that it's kind of a TNA movie at a certain point, and you're just like, where is this going? And you're just like invested. And it's one that I used to historically like to pop on to show random people who were uninitiated.
Late at night.
No,
or
like
sometime when you're by yourself late at night.
No.
Afternoon then.
But Wild Things is great. So much so that that was the second movie I bought on 4K.
You've got 4K TV and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I bought that on 4K. And it was more accidental. It was just that was the only one there. But I was like, I have a 4K. Why not? So I upgraded.
What the hell?
Another answer for you is Kevin Smith's Tusk. A lot of people find that movie just absolutely repulsive. I happen to like the movie. I think it's very good. It's certainly not one of his best movies. I also say it's certainly not one of his worst, but I think that has one of the most gripping shock shots that you've ever seen in a quote-unquote like creature feature or torture porn kind of movie. And I genuinely, unabashedly love that. I saw it opening day when it came out in theaters.
Year would that have been?
2014.
Oh, okay.
And it came out on my wife's birthday. We went to separate movies, and her movie got done before mine, so she just decided to sneak into my theater, and she walked in at the grotesque shot, looked at me, like made eye contact to let me know that she was there and she saw the gruesome shot, and then just walked out and started immediately blasting me on text like, you're just depraved.
My lawyer will be in touch.
I was alone in the theater, mind you. That's how successful that movie was. It's also an early A24 film. The last one I'm going to mention, because I decided to only hit you with 3, is the 2017 Power Rangers is shockingly good. Nobody gives it credit. I think that is much better than anything else in that franchise, which is admittedly mostly disposable at the best. That movie is really good. It is essentially a remake of Breakfast Club, but just extending the last half hour to have then the characters don costumes and slap a giant gold robot, which is probably the only thing that Breakfast Club was missing. Some kaiju action.
Okay, yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, because back in the day, I think I blind buy the previously viewed Blu-ray of that and was relatively kind of impressed, because, I like I never liked Mighty or the Power Rangers or anything, because I was too old at the time to really, we were making fun of it as late teens and stuff when it was coming out, so I was never into it or whatever. But I remember, sometimes I'd find myself watching the opening credits, and that shot of the pink one doing her gymnastics was agreeable. But other than that, but yeah, I agree that I only seen it once, but I was kind of like pleasantly surprised.
I've revisited that one a couple of times, and I really enjoy that movie.
Okay, so those are the 3 that...
What are yours?
Well, I put some down here, and like I say, this isn't probably one of the ones that can come up later. It could, things could be added later, but as I said, I'm a big fan of slasher films and bad horror films, so
Same.
There could be a lot of stuff that would go onto here, but what I wrote down was the movie from the mid-'80s, which recently came out on Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray, Creature. The Alien ripoff.
Yes, I saw that one time on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I found myself enjoying that movie despite its reputation for not being very good. I was like, this isn't bad. What are people talking about?
The guy I think the guy who made it was like a super sci-fi fan. There's a lot of, and I'm assuming they're actual authentic props from Forbidden Planet in Creature.
Yeah.
Some of the thing that he turns the thing and turns this to open the door or whatever. There's Forbidden Planet and maybe other sci-fi movie props in Creature. And if you haven't seen the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray, which has both cuts, there's an extended cut and the normal theatrical. They both look just unbelievable. Creature's been a guilty pleasure of mine since I probably first saw it in the late 80s on Media VHS.
Fun fact, that's one of my favorite posters, the VHS cover of that. That's what I just think that's a great gripping poster.
It looks so stupid in the movie, The Creature, but with his
Yeah.
with his
But
kind of limp head just flopping around. But you're right, the poster does look,
Poster's pimp.
the poster does look cool. So Creature, and what else do I have on here? I've got, well, like I say, yeah, Slumber Party Massacre. I'm a huge fan of the original Slumber Party Massacre. Don't Go in the Woods could obviously also be on this list.
Yeah.
So many movies like that. Toolbox Murders, Nail Gun Massacre, my listing for this, although just like with Matt, I don't feel guilt for liking these movies. People should feel guilt for liking, in my opinion, more mainstream stuff. But that's just my thoughts. So these things, although I don't feel guilt, it would probably go under the whatever he said. What did you say? Guilty pleasure
I guess
category.
Nowadays, the guilty pleasures would be acknowledging that you like really movies made by problematic material, or like a Woody Allen movie or something like that, or like the Harry Potter franchise because of J.K. Rowling being
because of just
absolutely
political
insane.
regarding the people behind
Like,
it.
yeah, either they've done horrible things or they have terrible stances, like Mel Gibson and stuff like that, that are just so problematic. Where you're like, I still love Road Warrior. It sucks that the person starring in it is like just the most repulsive human being. But this is a pimp movie, like it's that kind of thing. So that's Anyway,
So that'll probably do it for our our guilty pleasures. Like I say, pretty much every more or less slasher, Z grade freaking movie that I like could almost go under that category.
I
honestly,
guess the last time we got together, like 10 years ago, I made you record a review for Ghoulies, and not Ghoulies 1, Ghoulies 2 is one of my all-time favorite movies.
I like how you say "made me."
You were like, really? Nobody's gonna watch this. But
That was every video on the channel, but
fair enough. Ghoulies 2, genuinely one of the best sequels. I love that movie.
that would go under.
I guess, quote unquote, guilty pleasure.
But the underrated sequels.
Oh, I mean, yeah, certainly.
Would that go under there?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, underrated sequels.
Okay, so next question, which I'm going to actually probably reverse say this, and I'll let Matt answer first. But the second question from Will is, what in your opinion is there, or if you think there is one, a best decade for movies?
I don't have a good answer for that. That one is a hard one for me to really articulate. The 70s had some of the most influential movies, as did in a weird way like the 50s and 40s. But you also have like I'm a big horror guy, so the 80s had the prime slasher horror element. It was 10 uninterrupted years of gritty, grim horror, and I liked that. But it also didn't have a lot of creativity. The corporate filmmaking was really apparent, so there's things I don't like about that from the 80s. 90s is corporate filmmaking, but on a more blockbuster scale that appealed to me. That's like the era I grew up in, but I also recognize the hollowness of some of that. However, you also got a movement of the indie film that was shaped our now, the Jon Favreau's, the Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, all of whom still make contemporary films and stuff like that, and they're event pieces. Even Christopher Nolan came out of the 90s.
What the hell was his first movie?
The Following.
Oh, okay.
It was like 97, 98.
Okay.
Then in the 2000s, with the addition of many more movie studios, the 2000s and 2010s had so many movies that, you can point to some major movies or franchises that aren't very good, like Twilight or Transformers and stuff like that, and say cinema sucks because of that. But the mainstream stuff isn't necessarily as good as everything else that came out. The year Roger Ebert died in 2013, he said that the year prior he had seen 413 major release films the year leading up to his death.
That's more than one a day.
Exactly. But that just goes to show how much movies were coming out at that time stateside. So in a weird way, I would have to say like the 2000s or 2010s, just because the sheer volume that was out there was so much good stuff. You just might not have watched it because the thing that was at the forefront of the screen was like sparkly vampires. So I don't have an answer. It's all good.
My answer's kind of reversed. So I'm a fan of all movies all the way back to frickin'. I was a big fan of silent movies in my late teens and my 20s, and because it was much easier as a filmmaker, wannabe filmmaker, to make silent films and not have to deal with sound. I made a lot of silent shorts and things, and Super 8 even and things. So I was a big aficionado of silent films in my teens and early 20s and stuff. So I go back all the way to the frickin' teens, or the beginning of cinema, and then I love the 30s, 40s, 50s, and it's funny, and because of the age I grew up in, being born in the mid-late 70s, I love the 70s, and obviously, as you mentioned, so many classic movies from the 80s, and you forgot Arnold Schwarzenegger and freaking I'll be back in freaking Stallone and all these, mindless muscle action movies and things, in addition to the slashers. The 90s, it was kind of like mid 90s is when I was starting to get disillusioned when after Jurassic Park, I was like, for me, the thing that was really disillusioning, having grown up in the late 70s and the 80s and things, was after Jurassic Park, all of a sudden, like CG, like if a movie had, like even Mortal Kombat, even the most stupid like CG little thing, it was like, ooh, look at that, it's, it's got CG. So for me, I'm a little bit not so kind on like maybe the last half of the 90s when things were starting to, when CG was starting to take over and movies were looking more digital and things. So the reason I say this is kind of reverse answer is because I think pretty much every decade up until, we'll say through the 80s, minus the 60s, like for something about the 60s for me, I'm just like, I mean, obviously 2001 A Space Odyssey came out, so there's exceptions.
I was going to say, there's one great year. 1968 had so many movies I love. Rosemary's Baby. It also had Planet of the Apes. It had Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead. So I'm not saying that nothing from the 60s, but I think as a whole, if I had to pick from what I've experienced in my life of movies, the 60s is probably my most, or the least favorite decade. So I'm kind of going to answer it in reverse. I mean, that's of the 21st century, or the 20th century rather. I'm not necessarily keen on anything post 20th century. So we're just talking like 19 teens through the end of the 20th century. But yeah, for me, it's not so much. I can't really think of a best decade because there's so many great decades. Yeah. But I can think of my least favorite, which is the 60s.
The 60s is also if you notice, that's the one that I didn't mention either.
And as we said, yes, there were some great movies that came out in the 60s, but it's probably more or less few and far between.
Like, every year has at least one great movie. Like, 1960 had The Apartment, is a masterpiece of cinema. But, by and large, the 60s is the most just like, what are we doing here, guys?
I'm thinking of just a lot of Doris Day, the Pajama Game.
I mean, Psycho came out in 1960, Peeping Tom, I guess, as well. But, but most of it was that kind of stuff that just doesn't
Doris
work
Day,
for me.
Color, just like rom-com hijinks BS. And we're too intellectual to
I don't know, I just was praising Tusk, so...
Okay, I'm too intellectual to go for that kind of stuff.
So,
next question?
Next question, let's move on.
Yeah, we're okay. Okay, so this one was difficult, and this is one that, for me, underrated sequels that I think or maybe both of us could possibly revisit in the future, because I think there's a lot of answers to this, but I can't come up with a lot right on the spot. So underrated sequels, in our opinion, what's Matt's thoughts?
I mean, I get, Ghoulies too. But there's also sequels that are not necessarily thought of. I think Scream 3 is a kind of a good example. It's considered by most the worst of the Scream movies, but it's also, not a bad movie. I think it's fairly underrated. I think losing the Kevin Williamson of it all kind of hurts, but it has aged fairly well. The fact that Wes Craven had to reshape the entire movie based on the Columbine tragedy, and then chose to direct his movie by having the villain of the piece ultimately be the studio that takes trauma and releases it for modern entertainment by cribbing from real-life events, as they're doing by making these stab movies. He was making a film that's reflective of that era, that people don't really acknowledge that he did that. And then having not the killer, but the main villain of the film be the head of the studio who's preying on young women and completely destroying their lives, willfully, knowledgeably, knowingly, and making money off of it for profit. Under the House, that the biggest producer that has gotten notoriety for doing such things is the actual producer of that movie. So I think Scream 3 has aged insanely well. It's not as good as the films that surround it, but I don't think it's, by any stretch of the imagination, a bad movie. So in that sense, it's an underappreciated sequel.
Okay, a mini Scream 3 review as well.
There we go. I just watched it the other day, so that, I guess that's probably why that popped up. I bought the 4K on that. I'm upgrading my stuff, so I watched that.
Is there any others?
There's, I'm sure a lot. I think Friday the 13th 7 is one of the better movies of that
A
franchise.
lot of people like that one.
People do? Oh, I guess I just kind of write off most of that franchise, so I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, but that is the first one with Kane Hodder, though, right?
Correct.
So that's probably why. But most of the people I know don't really like that one because they didn't like the whole, like, suddenly he's battling a girl that has,
Carrie.
for no reason, has powers. And I'm like, well, he has powers for no reason, so why shouldn't she? It just, like, that amused me. That's the thing I like about the film. Even, like, Nightmare on Elm Street 5. A lot of people hate that. I don't think that's a bad movie.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm thinking about it. I'd say Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is an underrated sequel. A lot of people don't like it, but I think the way it veers away from the rules of the first one is kind of interesting.
I'm going to touch on that one in a little bit for one of the other answers.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. Do you have any other?
Is that your underrateds?
Yeah.
All I could think of was like Amityville 2 as well. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I guess he doesn't.
I haven't seen the second one. I just saw the first.
You haven't seen this? Oh.
I've only seen the first one. Margot Kidder. That's all I've seen.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
I haven't even seen the remake with Deadpool or whatever.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. But that's interesting. You haven't seen but 2. But yeah, when I was a teenager, I think I liked 2 more because it was made by an Italian, so it had that Italian. Nice. Almost Sam Raimi-ish visual quality. So Evil Dead 2, or I mean Evil Dead 2, Amityville 2 is something that I could think of. And like Jaws 2, people might give that a lot of, you can't agree on that.
Nah.
The reason I like Jaws 2 is because I really think it's a really good continuation of Jaws in the sense that it captures just the feeling of, the Brody family, the growing kids, John Williams is back, and it's more like, instead of like an adult movie, it's more like a teen movie now, where you've got all these teens hanging around. It's kind of almost like, even though it doesn't have the drama necessary of Breakfast Club, but I kind of enjoyed it because what was happening at that time, along with Halloween and things, was that it was kind of like the beginning of the teen movie and stuff. So it was like a teen movie version of Jaws, and John Williams back is huge.
The John Williams thing is really good. I revisited all those movies last summer for the first time since the VHS days. Like, I'd seen the first one a billion times, but I hadn't seen any of them in their proper format, so I watched them all on Blu-ray. And Jaws 2, I think the first half is pretty solid, and then it just kind of peters out once it becomes a shark movie. And there's so much emphasis on the Brody kids until they just kind of dip out of the movie, and they have no bearing on anything after a while, which is kind of disappointing. Jaws 3 I think is the absolute worst. Everybody attacks.
You think it's worse than 4?
Yes, I think
wow.
So 3 is a bad movie that doesn't lean into its badness, whereas number 4 is so bad that it kind of hurtles itself around the sun and becomes very watchable. I think it's the most watchable sequel of the 3. It might be because it is so atrocious, but I also can't help admiring how awful it is.
You like Jaws 4 more than 2?
Yeah, I do. The only 2 movies I own, because I ended up selling them, was 1 and 4, and it's because 4 has just some of the best lines, the moment when the Brody son says that he always wanted to make love to a welder, is one of the most magical movie moments of my life.
Well, yeah, I admit that line's good.
I mean, it's not. It's terrible. It's just the worst.
I mean,
but it's
bad good.
It's so I just love it. That movie is perfect.
Well, would that be a would that be a guilty pleasure?
I guess, but yeah, I guess that would be a kind of guilty pleasure. Jaws: The Revenge but the thing is, it's not a good movie in any stretch of the imagination.
I agree.
It is undeniably watchable. You just want to. Once you start it, you're just like, I have to watch. The best part is when she just randomly has a mental connection to the shark that's never addressed again.
Well, it wasn't addressed before or after, was it?
No, it's just
There
like,
it is.
Yeah, it just happens, and it's like, this is magic.
To each their own. Let's see here. So that all I could think of is Amityville 2 and Jaws 2. I'm sure there's so many more. Like I say, I might or we might, who knows, revisit that in the future. I'm sure there's so many more, but it's hard to think them up on the
I'll pay
spot.
attention so that the next time we get together, maybe we can extend.
Maybe we can extend it.
Yeah.
Now, this is another one that was difficult for me, and I could probably think of more answers in the future. Movies that grew on you over time.
Yeah, this one I didn't have an answer for.
At all.
There's movies that I've liked more the second time I watch it, or things that I discover. Maybe I didn't really respond to the movie, but then I discovered that it's a really strong conversation piece. Like last year, Zone of Interest was that. It's just like kind of a meh movie, in my opinion. I think it's good, but like it didn't really do much for me. However, I found myself talking to everybody who had seen it at great lengths, and so I was like, well, clearly this movie had more of an effect than I initially gave it credit for. So it grew on me in that sense. But I'm struggling to come up with a good answer for this one.
Okay, yeah, maybe something in the future for Matt, maybe not. The only thing I could really come up with is a couple of horror movies that like Don't Go in the House. Like when I first saw that, have you seen it at all? Probably not. When I first saw that, I wasn't too thrilled about it, but then when I showed Keith, my buddy Keith has over the years has helped me appreciate some of the movies, some of the goofy ass horror movies that maybe I didn't see anything in there before. He helps me over the years appreciate some of the goofy, just zany insanity that was there that maybe I didn't notice. I needed his whatever.
And sometimes I think there's value
stuff
in
to
that.
see that. And another movie that he kind of introduced me to that I didn't like so much in the 90s that has grown on me is Tobe Hooper's Funhouse. That's a movie that he liked a lot as a teenager. He showed it to me when we were teenagers. I didn't think too much of it except for the shower scene at the time. But over the years, I got the DVD, and then of course it started growing on me. And then of course I got the Blu-ray and stuff. And Funhouse and Don't Go in the House are the two ones, the first ones that kind of crossed my mind. Like I say, I'm sure there's more, possibly future videos. Who knows?
Yeah. I got nothing.
Movies that should be remade.
So
This is interesting. Thank you, Will. I think these are really good questions. So it's like I'm anti-remake. I don't know where you are. I mean, I guess if it's good, you don't mind it.
There are good remakes. There are great remakes. There are ones that I think stand shoulder to shoulder, or like at least rival theirs. But the best remakes, or what I think that the approach you should do to do a remake is take a movie that almost works but doesn't quite. And so the only answer I had prepared was Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Where I, like, the concept of that movie, somebody going into the nightmare house, Nancy's house, and discovering Nancy's diary, and that's the thing that rekindles the memory of Freddy, is a genuinely good concept. It is a movie that like should work. The way that they execute it, I don't think works at all, which kind of leads into the next
other
couple.
question.
But it's like conceptually speaking is relatively strong, and I have grown admiration for parts of the movie and stuff like that. And that one is one where the fan base is growing for it. But it just, for me, I think is the weakest Nightmare movie with, Robert Englund. And when they were doing like the Jackie Earle Haley one that I did not like, I was like, you know what? Maybe for the second one they'll actually attempt to do Nightmare 2, but do it based on that concept and then do their own story with it. I think there's places to go with that. And so yeah. But anyway, that's its own thing. What do you think?
And just in case you're wondering what wind sounds like, you might get a good dose of wind in this video.
It blows.
What?
I said it blows.
Oh yeah, wind blows. Have you seen The Weatherman? It's bunch of wind that blows all over.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before, years and years ago, back before last year when we were doing stuff. But I think, and this kind of goes into another one of these topics as well, I think Plan 9 from Outer Space would be a great remake. And you said years ago that there is some, and remember, my title at the time was simply Plan 9, and wasn't there something that was made that was Plan 9?
I think there was. I like that's going back to old memories.
But I think Plan 9 from Outer Space, in my opinion, the movies that you should remake are not the movies that are classic and already good, but the reason they do that is because they've got a decades of built-in advertisement within the name, but make bad movies that might have had a little bit of potential. Remake those. That's my idea.
And oftentimes they add nothing. Like King Kong is fascinating because the original one is just genuinely amazing. The second one, or the 70s one, is
76.
just kind of garbage and has aged just like milk. And
the big hand.
It's so bad. Like the effects don't look as good as the damn stop motion, which is fascinating. I am a believer in the Peter Jackson one, but he made a very he had a lot of reverence for that first movie. However, it seemed like he made that movie with love and not as a cash grab. The 70s one seemed like it was a cash grab. And that's the difference. That's why, like, the Friday the 13th remake, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake that we just talked about, those feel like cash grabs. There's nothing that they're bringing to the table. There's no reverence there. So much so that I think the Nightmare one, the director hadn't even seen the original movie.
I don't doubt it.
So it's like... So I agree. Remake things that...
suck.
That
maybe had potential, even if they didn't.
Yeah, like Barbed Wire. Like, let's try to remake Barbed Wire. It's an interesting concept. I mean, it's Casablanca with a busty blonde. But, like, why not try to make that work? She's a character that existed in the comics for a good amount of years prior to the film's release. Maybe dip into those and try to make that a film. I don't know.
Okay. Are we done with that?
Yeah.
Movies? Yeah, so all I could think of is Plan 9 from Outer Space. Again, maybe future topic, maybe not. It's hard to think of. I mean, these are pretty stumper questions.
Yeah.
And I think we already kind of, in a way, covered this. Another point here is good concept, poorly executed. I mean, I think you kind of already...
Yeah.
I mean, I got Plan 9 from Outer Space written there. Did we more or less cover that?
Yeah, we covered that one. My answer is still going to be Nightmare 2. I'm sure there's other ones I just don't have.
Yeah, these are
in the bank, I guess.
I keep on saying these are stumper questions, and I kind of don't understand this question. It's kind of like almost something that I guess he just wanted to know in closing, our thoughts. One-hit wonder actors like Mark Hamill and David Naughton. Like, I don't know if he just wants us to list more.
Yeah.
I don't know what you want.
Who are our favorite one-hit wonders?
Yeah, I don't.
I didn't have a good answer for this one either.
Yeah. Will kind of answered it in his question.
Yeah, kind of. I think Mark Hamill has transcended his Luke Skywalker of it all. But the other ones not necessarily. I was struggling to come up with that because even if you say, like, I guess Bruce Campbell's a one-hit wonder. Like, really all he's got is Ash, but at the same time, he's also developed and done so many different things, and he's just innately likable that you can't really say Bruce Campbell. And so you'd have to go to somebody like, even like Rupert Grint from Harry Potter. He played Ron. He's done a lot of things since then that I think are considerably better than Harry Potter, but he's known as Ronald Weasley, or Daniel Radcliffe for that matter, as, Harry Potter. Done infinitely better things since Harry Potter, however, will always be known as the boy who lived. But that's something that, like, William Shatner has struggled with. And,
I mean...
But I would point that, like, William Shatner also had, like, T.J. Hooker and, like, Boston Legal and things like that afterwards. And then he became his own personality that people just kind of admire or shun depending on their position.
Okay, yeah, so I think that's a reasonably good answer to that question. Like I said, I guess he'd probably just want us to list more of what we thought. I mean, certainly Kevin Bacon after Friday the 13th, I mean, that was the peak, and then after that is just, you know, no one thinks about anything. But Betsy Palmer, one-hit wonder, Friday the 13th.
Yeah. That would be an interesting
Adrian King.
question. Is like directors that peaked with their first film, like something like that. Because in my opinion, I guess Sam Raimi peaked with Evil Dead. I think that first Evil Dead movie is the best thing he's ever done. That said, I wouldn't count him as like a filmmaker that's like necessarily past his prime or didn't go on to do other great things, because he certainly did. But yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, this probably turned out to be longer than anticipated, but what the hell, that's okay. Thank you very much, Will, for the questions. Hope we answered them in a way that satisfies you over there in the UK. Not that kind of satisfies, but you know, the one that keeps, okay, you know what I'm saying. But I guess that pretty much does it for this video. Thanks for asking. Thanks for participating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for filming it, Nate. You're welcome. And I guess we'll catch you on the next video.